Hey, what's up, MYM? Super excited to be hanging out with you this first week of the new year. Hello to 2022. We're excited to be kicking off with this brand new series this year on how to date. Maybe the holiday season wasn't everything you wanted it to be because you didn't get every Christmas gift you desired because you're still single as a Pringle. And we hope through this series not to find you a date, but rather to teach you how to date. Hence the title of this whole series. And over the next 5 weeks, we hope to give you some biblical principles from God's Word on how to operate in your relationships. Now, I just want to note that the point of this series is not to be telling you that you should be dating. Rather, we want you to honor the wisdom of your parents and your guardians, to listen to their guidance. If they say that you shouldn't date till you're 16 or 18 or 21 or 100, whatever they say, I want you to honor them in doing that. But through this series, over the next 5 weeks, we hope to give you some principles and guidance that when you're ready for dating, you'll know how to do it well. So let me give you an outline over the next 5 weeks of what we'll be talking about through this series. Tonight, we're talking about the purpose of dating, or the purpose of relationships in our lives. Just big scale, big picture relationships in general. Next week, Connell's going to be giving us a talk on the one, because we all want to come and we all want to find that one person to spend our lives with, right? And week 3 is, we're titling it Outdated, some guidelines to follow when we're dating. Week 4 is all about sex, and then week 5 is a Q&A. And in this Q&A, we want to put a note, if you're watching online, that this Q&A will not be posted online because we want to make sure the questions are answered based on the campus. So we want to answer Rochester questions for Rochester, Webster questions for Webster. Both Q&As will be live and in person at your campus. So make sure if you're watching online, you get to one of those campuses. You can submit a question if you're watching online by commenting, DMing us, or sending us an email. But just know that to hear that answer, you're going to have to come in person. If you're at one of our physical locations, there's a bucket in the lobby that you can handwrite your questions on and put them in there. Don't feel like you have to put your name. All the questions can be anonymous, and they can be anything in the category of identity, relationships, dating, hacks, whatever you want to know. And we want to make sure that these panels of answering the Q&A are a vast variety of people, meaning we want single people, some married people on the panel to give you some different perspectives on each of these questions you ask. Now, note, if you want a question answered, you got to write it in and put it in the bucket in the lobby. Make sure that you do that over the next couple of weeks. And also, just as a note, just as a side note for this series would be super easy for us to get off topic in our small groups. It'd be super easy for us to just go on these different rabbit trails and have conversations in our small groups, just all things dating, relationships, identity, and all these different things, right? But I want to put a plug for you to do your absolute best to stay on topic each and every week. You've heard the outline of the series. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff, and there's a Q&A week, right, where you can ask any question that hasn't been asked up to that point or answered up to that point. So just do your best to stay on topic with the questions, the scriptures, and the points for each given week. Each and every week, all 5 weeks, stay on topic in your small group so we can grow together in godly relationships and in our relationship with God. You know, I just talked about that we had our Christmas vacation, right, our Christmas break over the past couple of weeks. And I want to tell you about 2 Christmas gifts that I received this year that I absolutely loved and valued. One I received about 9 days before Christmas, and this was the birth of our second-born son, Sabbath Jude. He was born on December 16th, about noon, and he was born about 20 inches long, 7 pounds, 10 ounces. He's been an awesome addition to our family as we're growing from a family of 3 now to a family of 4. He's been a huge blessing to our entire family, and I just wanted to show you a picture of him because he's freaking cute, right? He looks just like his mom. And the second gift I received was this super practical. I don't know if it was something that I am like most excited about, like it was the best gift I got other than my son, right? But I do know that I wanted it, number one, and number two, I needed it and could really use it. And that was a power tools set. Like I got 4 or 5 different kinds of saws, 2 different styles of drills, a sander, a light, and so many cool things. And the reason this is an amazing gift that's super practical that I could use is there's so many benefits that it gives me in my life. Like I can build things now that I want. It's a new hobby. I really enjoy it. Number 2, another thing is it helps me save money. I can actually fix things on my own now and don't have to call somebody else to do it. I could build certain things to give away to other people as gifts if I wanted to. So there's a lot of great benefits that come with this power tool set. This is all the way over here on this side. This is the positive, right? But there's a big negative. Like, I could really hurt myself with some of these tools if I don't know how to use them in the right way. Like, if I don't know how to use certain saws, like, I could cut off my finger. Like, this isn't just like a knife that I could poke myself or slice open my hand and, ow, I need some stitches or some glue to put that back together. No, like, I could, like, sever off my finger. I could cut off a limb. I could sever a vein and bleed out and die. Like, that's very dramatic, I know, right? But ultimately, that really could happen. And this is the super negative. Over here is the super positive that we talked about. And the space in between is the knowledge and skill on how to know how to use that thing and then how to actually put that knowledge into practice and do it. And in order to cover this gap of not hurting myself to get all the benefits of the power tools, I have to ask myself this question. How do I find that knowledge to know how to use those tools? And how do I actually put it in play? How do I actually do that thing? And, you know, thinking about relationships and thinking about dating, a lot of the times our answer, if we put dating on these scales, right, the super positive, like you could find your spouse, spend your life with a person that you love and that is a joy, that this adventure that we call life could be so amazing. But on this other side, there's this dumpster fire of relationships that could leave you broken, hurting, and so many other people in the same boat with you if you don't know how to do it correctly. A lot of times the answer in this gap is, let's just figure it out. Like, let's just try, and we'll see what happens. And you start losing fingers is what happens. Like, you start cutting off your finger. That's what happens when we just try to figure it out. But if I'm thinking about my power tools, the thing that I want to do is I want to go to the creator of those power tools. Like, I don't care what random YouTubers have to say about how I should use this saw. I'm going to go to Craftsman. Like, Craftsman made the thing. That's the brand of the power tools. I'm going to go to Craftsman and ask Craftsman and go to their YouTube channel, go to their website, go to that user manual, because I believe that they made the thing. They know how to best use the thing. And then to make these other things, I'll go to these other YouTubers to get some tips and tricks and hacks on how to do that. And you know, for you and for me and for our relationships, we can use that same idea and principle. Because get this, in God's word, in the very beginning, if you go to like the very first page with the very first word of the very first book of the very first chapter of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says this, in the beginning, God created. In the beginning, God created. I want you to think about that principle. Like, in the beginning, God. Not you, not me, not the universe, God. Just God. All by himself. All alone. There's God. He existed before anything else existed. And in that, he had nothing, and then he made something. He started making the universe, or if you're a Marvel fan, the multiverse, right? He made everything that existed. That's how big and wonderful and powerful God is. He created. But more than create, if you read Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, he's not just the creator, but he is also the organizer or the orchestrator or the lawgiver. He actually orders things. He tells them not only what to be, but how best to be. Like, think about it like this. He creates trees, and he doesn't just say, hey, trees, figure it out. No, he goes apples, oranges, maples, oaks. He tells them what to do. He creates and orders his creation. And you could see this in chapter 1 because in verse 4, he creates light and darkness and then separates them. He creates waters and then separates them. He orders the waters, that he creates oceans and lakes and ponds and streams and brooks and rivers and creeks and all these different things. And then verse 11, he creates those different kinds of trees, those apples, those maples, all those different things. In day 14, he creates day and night. Or not day 14, verse 14. And in verse 20, we see in days 5 and 6, he creates animals and all their different kinds. That he doesn't just create a thing and leave it on its own to figure out how it should best operate in the universe, but he actually helps it along in sharing with it how it should do that thing. The point is here is that God, for all of creation, doesn't leave them on their own to try to figure out how to live and be in the world. He actually tells them and orders them in a direction, and in that direction isn't to restrain them or confine them, but it's to actually help them flourish and grow and be the best they can be in the world. And the same is true about you and me, human beings. Because once we get to verse 26 in Genesis chapter 1, it says this, Then God said, let us make mankind in our image and in our likeness. I want you to pick up, and you may see on the screen right now that those words, us and our are bolded. Because I want you to notice that's plural language. That God doesn't say, hey, I think I'm going to make mankind in my image, and my image I'm going to make them, and my likeness I'm going to make them. But it's a plural. It's us, our, and our. This is community language. And most scholars and most Bible theologians believe this is a language of the Trinity. That God makes mankind in his image, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. That there's community language. So in the beginning, there wasn't just this one deity God, but it's three in one. Father, Son, and Spirit. They had one heart, one mind, one mission, one focus. And three distinct persons. Father, Son, and Spirit. They were community. They had perfect relationship. And in that perfect relationship, the overflow of that was creation. That's why they made it beautiful and amazing and all these things. And then they made you and they made me. And to say it one way is, we have the thumbprint of the divine on us. Now, let me be clear here. That I'm not saying that you are God. I'm not saying that at all, because let's look at verse 27 together. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Because what this is not saying is that you're God, but you are like God. It's a very different language. You're not God, okay? Only God is God. But God created you and created me in his image. We have the image of God on us. And the word image in the original Hebrew language is different from the way that we think about image. Like if I took an image of myself, I wouldn't say that. I would say picture, right? But it would be an exact representation, a photocopy of me. Because that would be me taking a picture of me. But that's not the way the Hebrew word is used, because for our original English language, for photo or image, it's the exact physical form and appearance of that thing. A picture of me looks exactly like me, exactly the way I look. But for the Hebrew word of image, it's a representation of the physical appearance, meaning that for you to have the image of God in your life and on you means that you're supposed to share the character traits of God. His love, his joy, his kindness, his created ability, his ordering. Because God took nothing and made something. He's a creator. But for me and for you to create, we need to take something and make something else, right? But we can do those things that God has created us to do. The next thing I want you to notice in verse 27 is that God created both genders, male and female. And this is where we get hung up, because we read in verse 27 that God created mankind in his own image. God, he created them. We read that masculine pronoun of he. And we define and confine God to the male gender. But in any other atmosphere of what God created, we wouldn't do that thing. Like we wouldn't say God created water, therefore he is water. God created a mountain, therefore he is mountain. God created a tree, therefore he's a tree. God created a bear, therefore he's a bear. But the best way we know how to operate, and we think of gender in a different terms, but we shouldn't. We should look at it and say God created that thing, and nothing that God creates can confine him because he sits outside of it. Like, for example, I created a pantry for my wife with my awesome power tools for Christmas, but nobody would look at me and be like, hey, you're a pantry. No, that's not me at all. You see, I say that to say that God is neither a male or a female because God cannot be confined to his creation of what he created. But he did create both male and female genders. He created you and did not make a mistake. And the qualities that you have as a man or as a male or as a female, God loves and celebrates those qualities, and he wants you to put those on display because you both, all of us together, give a full picture of what God is like in the world when we are operating and exercising the image of God the way God has called us to in our lives and in our relationships. Because we are called to be image bearers of God, to give off his presence in the world, to be the essence of his nature, the exact image bearer and representation of what he is like to the rest of creation. That's why the purpose of our relationships that we learn from these two verses of Genesis is to be welcomed into God's story and take on the identity of his covenant. Now that may seem like a wonky sentence, but let me unpack it by going back to verse 26. Because in verse 26, I just read the first sentence, but it says this: God said, let us make mankind in our image and in our likeness, so that, the purpose being this, they may rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals, over the creatures that move along the ground. The purpose of mankind being created and being in relationship to God is different than everything else that God created. Think of it like this. God made fish and told them to do fish stuff, right? To swim, to eat, to make more fish. To trees, he told trees, he made orange trees. And you know what orange trees' job is? Make oranges. He made a mountain, he said, don't move, all right? That's what he made a mountain to do. But when he looked at creation and then made mankind, made man and woman, made human beings in the world, he says, this is what I want you to do. The exact same thing I've been doing already. Like look at it. Like God was in perfect relationship with himself, Father, Son, and Spirit. Not a romantic relationship, but in a perfect relationship. Think about the relationship that you have with your parents or with your best friends and never having a disagreement with them. Like never having an argument with them. And you always being in a good, loving, perfect relationship with them. That's what God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit had with each other. And from that, they created and they invited you and I, human beings, into that relationship, into that loving community. And the next thing is, as we're being welcomed into their story, we're saying, hey, join us in the work of creating and ordering. As Genesis 1:26 says, rule with us. Have dominion. Exercise good, loving power. Take chaotic hatred and make it love and order. That's what God invites us to do through our relationships. They're not meant to be destructive or filled with hate. They're meant to be filled with love and ordering and operated in the guidelines and the fences that God himself sets up in our lives. And from the start, the root place for our identity is supposed to be placed in God and then in everything else. Our identity is supposed to be found in God. Like God first, he says, come into the story. Start there. But so many of us look at these principles in the Bible, and I know your mind's already spinning of like, yeah, I just want to do everything out of love. And you're defining that by your own standards. Like you're not even looking to God in how to do it. Like God set this whole thing up. He created you. He put these guidelines in place so you could best flourish and grow and be in the world. But you're like, no, I don't want to be in that. I want to be over here, and then I'll figure this out on my own. But God said, create and order here, and then grow from that place. Grow out of that Start your identity, root your identity deep into me and my story because I'm your creator. In the beginning, God, not you, not me, God. Start there and allow it to grow and flourish and about love and ordering and beauty to come from that place, not whatever you define it, not whatever I define it. Because God invited us into his story. The purpose of our relationships is to be welcomed into God's story, excuse me, and take on the identity of his covenant. You see, the problem is with all of this, even like this sounds beautiful, right? This is amazing. But everybody has their own opinion about how we should be in the world and operate in our relationships. Like the number one thing I hear all the time is the reason that we have relationships is for our own individual satisfaction. That as long as you feel happy, you should be in relationships. But the problem with that is as soon as you're not happy, you bounce. It's so many of you students are on the backside of people who bounced. And like think of your parents. So maybe some of your parents have been divorced, right? And I'm not saying everybody's parents got divorced for this reason, but I know a lot of people who their parents got divorced because of this. That one day, one of them woke up and said, you know what? I'm not happy anymore. I'm out. And maybe that made them happy, but everyone else left in the wake was left with brokenness and in ruin, and they're just trying to figure out how to make it work now. Because this picture was supposed to be beautifully and framed, and all of a sudden somebody took a hammer to it, and it's all ripped up, and we're like, I don't know what to do now. You see, when we live and have our being in relationship as our primary focus to be our own individual satisfaction, we leave a wake of ruin behind us. When we only look out for ourselves and our own individual satisfaction, there's another word for that. It's called being selfish. So the purpose of relationships is not for our own individual satisfaction. But let me say this. If you're dating someone, I'm not saying that you should just always stay in that relationship as always be happy and just fake it till you make it. Like, I'm not saying that. If there's any point in your dating relationship that you could say, like, you know what, I can't see myself marrying this person, then you should get out. Like, and be civil and be kind about it. Like, don't just start, like, cursing them out or anything like that. But you should be kind and you should move and have a being and still try to do your best to manage that relationship. But I'm not saying you should always stay in that. Or if there's a toxic relationship or not a healthy one, that you should always just stay in it. There's different seasons and stages for relationships, but our primary mode is not to be selfish in all of them. The second reason that people are in relationships most of the time is for two people's happiness. I hear this all the time. Like, as long as the two people in the relationship are happy. Well, there's problems there because that says that the primary of all relationships is just two people in them. And that's not true. Like, all of us are connected even within our relationships. Like, there are greater intimacies in different stages of relationships. And also, we could just say this. This is not in the Bible. Like, it's not there. Like, to say that the purpose of our relationships is for two people to be happy, that's not what God says at all. Happiness is an overflow of operating and being in a good standing with God and doing things the way that he calls us to do them. It's an overflow. It's not the primary focus. And you may be hearing all this, some of you for the very first time, and thinking, Daniel, I think about my friendships, my relationships that I've had, and I've operated out of one of those two lies that I've heard. Well, I'm just too far gone. Like, Jesus can do nothing with me. God can do nothing with me. I just might as well just keep moving. And to you, I would say that's the furthest thing from the truth. Because we have Genesis chapter 1 and 2 where God creates and orders the story, invites humans to be in the story with him, and then releases them into the world to continue on. But then Genesis chapter 3 happens where humans bring brokenness and sin into the world. And then from Genesis chapter 4 on is God righting the wrongs that humans made and continuing to invite them in, say, hey, join me in my covenant. And that word covenant simply means partnership. It simply means to be in partnership with God to do what he has been doing. And then in the New Testament and the Gospels, Jesus, the Son of God, shows up on the scene. And he starts just eating meals with people. He starts eating meals with random people that knew that he was coming never thought he would eat with. Two specific groups of people that we see in the scriptures are the tax collectors and the sinners. Now let's talk about the tax collectors for a minute. Tax collectors were people who were government workers who basically lived their lives for their own individual satisfaction. They basically cursed their family, cursed all their friends, betrayed their country, and said, I'm going to extort you for every dime and penny you make so I can be wealthy. They saw the world for their own individual satisfaction. And Jesus ate with them, gave them a bigger vision of what their life could be. He simply said, come and follow me. No longer have to live this way. I'm inviting you into my story and asking you to be in partnership with me to live different. But it starts with you following me. You see, Jesus' invitation to follow him has layers of meaning behind it. The first is you believe what he said, and then you do what he did, right? You believe what he said, and then you do what he did. Our following Jesus is never a passive activity of just our brain. It requires our brain, our hearts, our hands, and our feet to be moved to action. So ask yourself the question, are you really following Jesus, or you just know some stuff about him? Let's talk about the second group of people, the sinners. You may think, oh yeah, that's just like normal everyday folk, right? It's just normal everyday people. But no, the way this term was used culturally was to dictate a group of people that did a vocation that was so terrible that the tongue didn't even want to share it. It was so unethical, so unthought of, that it's like, those people? And to those people, Jesus ate with them, sat with them, looked at them in the eyes and said, follow me. I have a different vision for your life than you have. So no matter where you're at, if you're in one of our physical locations or watching online tonight, I believe Jesus wants to look at you and say, follow me. It doesn't matter the wake of destruction that you've put in your past. We can deal with that. But right now, I want you to look at me and say this, that do you want to follow Jesus? Because Jesus, and the purpose of him creating you on this earth, was to invite you into a relationship with him, into a partnership with him and his story, and to be unleashed in the world to do the work that he has already been doing. Will you join him?